Have you ever found yourself just staring at a contact in your phone? Like maybe it's an old college friend or, a former colleague you haven't spoken to in years.
Oh, yeah. Constantly.
Right. And you catch yourself wondering if that phone number is even still active. But you desperately want to avoid the sheer undeniable awkwardness of actually calling it just to find out.
Because, what if they actually answer? That's the nightmare scenario.
Exactly. You're just sitting there like, hey, just checking if my phone works. Or, on the flip side, imagine you are managing a business. You've got this massive database of thousands of customers, and you are just completely exhausted from wasting time and money calling dead numbers.
It's a surprisingly universal problem, honestly. You want the information, but you absolutely do not want to make the phone ring. The goal is basically to be a digital ghost. You want to verify the existence of the line while, remaining completely invisible to the person holding the device.
Yes, that is exactly it. And that is the mission of our deep dive today. We are exploring the surprisingly complex, slightly stealthy world of verifying if a phone is active, completely under the radar.
Yeah, it's a fascinating topic.
It really is. And we've pulled some incredible insights from a comprehensive guide by Verificare today, which really gets into the weeds on this. We're going to break down the technical realities, the behavioral social engineering, and the strict legal frameworks governing how our phones are constantly being invisibly pinged.
And we are going to look at this from pretty much every possible angle. Like, we'll start with the simple messaging app workarounds you can do right now, on the phone in your hand.
The easy stuff.
Right. Then we'll scale up to carrier-level lookups, which reveal some truly fascinating things about global telecommunications. We will even dive into the actual physics of cell towers.
Oh, I love the physics part.
It's wild. And finally, we'll wrap up with the privacy laws that actually prevent companies from just scanning all of our numbers 24/7.
Okay, let's unpack this. We'll start with the frontline hacks. These are basically the digital breadcrumbs we're all leaving behind in our pockets right now. Because before we get into the massive enterprise-level technology, we really need to understand why this kind of silent verification is even necessary in the first place.
Right, because numbers don't just vanish.
Exactly. When you cancel a cell phone contract, your number doesn't just instantly disappear or go to the next person in line at the phone store.
Yeah, there is a built-in cooling-off period. The telecommunication companies usually wait about 6 months after a number is deactivated before they recycle it and reassign it to a new user.
Which, makes perfect sense when you think about it. They want to prevent cross wires. If I get a new number, I definitely don't want to be receiving two-factor authentication texts for your bank account.
Or like calls from your dentist.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But that 6-month limbo is a big reason why verifying numbers is so relevant, especially for businesses.
Oh, absolutely.
You could have a number in your phone book that has been completely dead for 5 months, but because it hasn't been reassigned to a new network user yet, you have no immediate way of knowing its status just by looking at it.
So how do you check it without calling? Well, if you pull out your phone right now, there are a few tricks using apps you probably already have installed. Let's start with WhatsApp, which has a very specific workaround you can use right in your web browser.
Oh, right, the URL trick.
Yeah. Instead of opening the app and, clumsily trying to add a new contact, you go to your browser and type in a specific URL. It's ap.whatsapp.com/send?phone equals, and then followed by the full number.
Right, but there's a catch there, right?
Yes. The crucial detail here is that you must include the country code, but you completely leave out the plus sign.
Just numbers.
Exactly, just the raw numbers. And the result of typing that in is incredibly straightforward. You totally bypass the normal contact syncing process.
And it works.
If that specific number is currently registered with an active WhatsApp account, the browser will automatically prompt you to open a chat window with that person.
It's just brilliant in its simplicity. No call is made, and absolutely no notification is sent to their device. You don't even have to type a message.
Right, you just sit there and look at the screen.
Yeah. The mere fact that the chat window generates means you instantly know the number is attached to an active account. It saves you from, sending a message into the void.
It does, but WhatsApp is very binary. It either exists or it doesn't. Telegram, on the other hand, takes a completely different, much more nuanced approach to user privacy.
Oh, Telegram is fascinating here. It's like they've literally gamified privacy. If a user turns on their privacy settings, Telegram actively obscures their exact activity.
Yeah, they refuse to give you the exact timestamp.
Right. Instead of telling you this person was last online at 2:01 p.m., It gives you one of 4 incredibly vague time windows.
It's so clever. First, there's recently, which is a window that could mean they were online 10 seconds ago or, anywhere up to 2 or 3 days ago.
Right.
Then there's within a few days, meaning they were active anywhere from 2 to 7 days ago.
Then they have within a few weeks, which spans roughly a week to a month. And finally, my personal favorite, the incredibly ominous, a long time ago.
Which basically just means it's been over a month. Or they blocked you.
Yeah, exactly. But the psychology behind that design choice is really interesting. If you think about it, it's a brilliant middle ground for the app developers.
How so?
Well, they are balancing the user's demand for privacy with the app's need for engagement. If you hide everyone's status completely, the app feels dead. Nobody wants to message into a ghost town.
That's very true.
But by giving you these vague windows, Telegram gives you just enough information to infer that the person is active, which keeps you engaged, without actually betraying the user's exact movements.
Yeah, exactly. You can also look for indirect clues on these apps, like whether previous messages got the double blue ticks or if the person is actively participating in shared groups. But as you said, it is not an exact science.
And then we move to the classic social platforms like Facebook Messenger and Instagram, the famous green dot.
Oh, the green dot.
Yeah, if you see that little green dot next to their profile picture, they are active, or were, very recently. But here is where Instagram gets really specific with its mechanics. I always think of Instagram's reciprocity rule, like a two-way mirror that suddenly turns into a solid brick wall.
That is a great visual, actually.
It really is, because if you decide you don't want people to see your active status, like you want to be totally invisible to your exes or your coworkers, you can easily go into your settings and turn off your activity status.
Right.
But the moment you do that, the two-way mirror becomes a brick wall. You don't get to spy on the neighborhood if you close your own blinds. Instagram instantly revokes your ability to see anyone else's green dot. It, demands equal transparency.
Which is a highly effective behavioral design to keep people sharing their status. But what is crucial for you to understand about all these platforms, WhatsApp, Telegram, Facebook, Instagram, is that they act purely as indirect verification tools.
Right. You're not actually checking the phone line.
Exactly. When you use that browser trick, you aren't actually pinging the cellular network. You are just checking a secondary database owned by Meta or Telegram.
It's essentially a proxy.
Right. But because these platforms generally require SMS phone verification to set up an account, mostly to prevent bot fraud, an active social profile strongly implies an active phone line.
Yeah. If they're posting stories of their lunch, the phone number attached to that account is very likely alive and well in their pocket.
Most definitely.
But clicking WhatsApp links and checking green dots is fine if you're just checking up on, like, one ex-colleague. What happens when we scale this up?
Yeah.
Say a medium-sized enterprise that has a database of 10,000 customer numbers.
Yeah, you simply cannot have an intern manually typing URLs into a browser for 3 weeks straight.
No, you definitely can't. And this brings us to a massive, expensive issue for businesses. The data shows that a staggering 91% of companies suffer from inaccurate contact data in their systems. Wait, 91%. That sounds incredibly high. Are they counting, like, any minor formatting error, like a missing space, or are we talking about completely dead, unreachable lines?
Well, it's a mix of both, really, but a massive portion of that is actual data decay. People change jobs, they drop secondary lines, they switch countries, and that bad data heavily impacts a company's bottom line.
Oh, I'm sure.
It represents wasted server space, misallocated marketing budgets, and it is terribly inefficient for call centers. I mean, imagine managing a sales team that spends a third of their day dialing numbers that just play a disconnected tone.
That would be maddening.
So to solve this, we transition from these manual consumer hacks to automated enterprise-level solutions. And the gold standard here is the HLR lookup.
HLR, Home Location Register. So this is a service that sends a non-disruptive ping directly to the telecom network. It basically taps the operator on the shoulder and asks, hey, is this specific number correct and is it currently active?
Yes.
And apparently, integrating this saves call centers up to 30% of their time. They just filter out the dead numbers entirely before anyone even picks up a headset.
It's incredibly efficient. They can even track if a number has recently changed carriers through portability tracking.
But wait, to do this en masse across different countries, don't all the numbers look completely different?
That's where the APIs come in. These bulk services use APIs that convert all those messy, differently formatted phone numbers in a company's database into a single standardized international format, which is called E.164.
Okay, let's visualize this. The E.164 format is essentially like a massive postal sorting machine for global telecommunications, right?
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it.
Like, if you have a database full of handwritten envelopes, some have area codes, some have dashes, some have local zeros in front,
Yeah.
the API acts like the sorting machine. It strips away all the local quirks, slaps a standardized barcode on it, basically the country code, plus the number, so the network can route the query globally without human intervention.
That is exactly how it works. It allows the system to validate thousands of numbers across the globe in seconds without getting tripped up by a random hyphen.
But wait, I have to stop you here, because the core concept of the HLR ping is still kind of wild to me.
How so?
A company can just invisibly knock on my phone's digital door to see if I'm home. Like, how does the phone know how to answer the network without actually ringing in my pocket? Why doesn't my screen light up?
What's fascinating here is that the cellular network operates on multiple parallel layers that you, the user, never actually see. When you use your phone, you are only interacting with the voice and data channels. Those are the parts that physically ring the speaker or load a web page on your screen. But underneath that, running silently in the background, there is a constant signaling channel.
Like a background conversation between the phone and the cell tower.
Precisely. As you move around your city, the network constantly needs to know which cell tower you are closest to so it can quickly route a call to you if one comes in. It doesn't wait for a call to start searching for you.
Oh, that makes sense.
So the HLR lookup queries the network's central database. The database simply checks the log of its most recent silent handshake with your phone's SIM card. This network registration works completely independently of your user interface.
Bro.
Yeah. The network confirms the SIM is registered and active and reports back to the business's API. All of this happens on that silent signaling channel without ever triggering the data channel that makes your phone ring.
That is incredible, and honestly, a little spooky. But it's not just massive corporations paying for access to these network tools. There are public resources available too, right?
Yes, definitely. For instance, in Spain, the CNMC, which is the National Commission on Markets and Competition, essentially their top telecommunications regulator, they offer a free public service.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Anyone can go to their website and check which operator a specific mobile number currently belongs to, though they do strictly limit it to 100 queries a day per IP address, just to prevent companies from abusing a free tool for bulk database cleaning.
Right. You don't want companies scraping that for free. And there are also community-driven directories you can use, things like List to Spam and Telos.
Yeah, those are great.
You don't even need to register an account for these. Everyday users just flag numbers that belong to telemarketers or scammers, creating this massive, crowdsourced reputation database. It's almost like a reverse verification. Instead of checking if a friend is real, you are checking if a stranger is a bot.
Exactly. But whether you are using a community list or an advanced corporate HLR ping, that invisible knock we were talking about brings up a really fascinating physical limitation.
The actual physics of it.
Right. It forces us to ask a purely mechanical question. What does a cell tower actually consider active versus inactive?
Right, because returning an inactive result doesn't necessarily mean the person canceled their contract. The physical reality of how our phones connect to the network completely dictates the results of these invisible pings. And the difference between your phone being inactive and your phone being off is crucial.
It really is the difference between a pulse and a flat line. When an HLR lookup or a network test shows a device as inactive, it usually means the phone is technically on, but in standby mode.
Okay.
It is quietly consuming a microscopic amount of battery, just waiting to receive a call or a notification.
But if the result is off, it means the device is completely powered down or sitting in airplane mode. It is physically incapable of receiving that silent ping on the signaling channel. But here is where the environment really messes with the data. We have to talk about coverage drain because the physics of this just blew my mind.
Oh, the brutal relationship between signal strength and battery life.
Yes. Think about it this way. Having bad cell coverage is exactly like trying to have a conversation with your friend at a really loud, crowded concert.
That's a perfect analogy.
Right. Because of all the noise and the physical distance, you have to scream at the top of your lungs just to be heard over the bass. And what happens? You lose your voice incredibly fast.
Yeah, exactly. When your phone has good coverage, say, you are standing near a window with a cell tower in sight. Your phone barely has to whisper to connect to the tower. It uses very little radio power.
Makes sense.
But when coverage is bad, maybe you are deep inside a concrete parking garage or, out in a rural area, the device automatically boosts its radio power output to hunt for a signal. It literally starts screaming to find a network. And that radio exertion drains your battery incredibly fast.
And this leads directly to what we could call a false negative in the database. If your battery completely dies at 3 p.m. because you were stuck in a bad coverage zone all morning, the network's silent handshake fails.
Right.
If a business pings you at 3:05 p.m., the network is going to report your number as dead or inactive. Your contract is perfectly fine, you paid your bill, the number is valid, but the battery is physically dead.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you can see why this technical context is so crucial for data management.
Yeah.
If a business runs an automated script that just blindly deletes any number that returns an inactive ping, they might accidentally wipe out thousands of perfectly valid paying customers whose phones just happen to be dead or in a subway tunnel that particular afternoon.
Oh, wow, yeah. That 91% bad data problem we talked about earlier, a company could actually make their data worse if they don't understand the physics of radio waves.
Absolutely.
And it gets even more complicated when you factor in the software inside the phone. Android and iOS actually handle this network hunting differently, right?
They do. Android systems generally allow users to manually dive into their cellular settings and select their preferred network generation. Like, you can choose to lock your phone strictly to 2G, 3G, 4G, or 5G.
Right.
iOS, on the other hand, operates more like a black box. It is designed to automatically default to whatever the software deems the fastest available network.
So an iPhone is constantly making its own invisible decisions about which network tower to prioritize connecting to, which entirely changes the nature of its silent handshake.
Exactly.
All this physical reality, the battery dying, the concrete walls blocking your signal, the operating system inside the phone, it just creates this layer of static that can easily confuse these invisible verification pings.
Which is exactly why there are specialized apps on the market, things like TestM or Phone Test, that do incredibly deep diagnostic analyses of a device. They check the physical screen, the battery health, the internal sensors.
But those are tools for testing a physical phone you are currently holding in your hand.
Right. If you are doing remote verification from 1,000 miles away, you simply have to accept a margin of error caused by real-world physics.
Okay, so we've covered the messaging apps, the massive corporate APIs, the postal sorting machines of EI.164, and the cell towers.
We've covered a lot.
We have. But knowing a phone's battery might be dead doesn't explain the biggest mystery here. If these APIs are so cheap, fast, and easy to use, why isn't my phone getting silently pinged by telemarketers every 3 seconds?
That's a very good question.
Like, what is actually stopping companies from just constantly scraping and pinging every single 10-digit combination in existence?
Well, that restraint isn't coming from the technology. It's coming from the law. This is where we leave the realm of physics and enter a very strict legal and ethical minefield.
And we are focusing specifically on the Spanish legal framework here, which is widely considered one of the strictest in the world. In Spain, a phone number is not treated just like a piece of random public data.
No, not at all.
It is protected by the RGPD, which is essentially the Spanish equivalent and application of the European GDPR and the LOPD-GDD, which is their specific organic law for data protection.
To put it simply, under those laws, your phone number is treated with an incredibly high level of legal reverence. It goes much deeper than just basic consumer protection.
How deep?
The security of this data is explicitly tied to Article 18.4 of the Spanish Constitution.
Oh, it's a constitutional right?
Yes, it is considered a fundamental right to personal privacy. The Constitutional Court recognizes that individuals have the absolute right to control their personal data and to dictate exactly who gets to access it and process it.
That is a massive deal. And the government actually updated these telecommunication laws very recently, right? The 2023 telecom law.
Yes, as of June 2023, the rules tightened significantly. Under this new law, companies simply cannot make commercial calls or process numbers for marketing without explicit prior consent from the user. You have to opt in.
Right.
There is one major legal exception, known as legitimate interest, but the Spanish Data Protection Agency, the AEPD, defines that exception very, very strictly.
Right. A company can't just throw up their hands and say, well, it's in my legitimate financial interest to try and sell this guy a timeshare.
Exactly. To claim legitimate interest, you must have a prior existing contract with the user, and the new products you are offering have to be extremely similar to what they already contracted for.
Let's look at a real-world scenario.
Yeah.
If you bought a car from a dealership, They might have a legitimate interest in using your number to offer you a scheduled maintenance plan for that specific vehicle.
Yes, that would be acceptable.
But they absolutely cannot take your number and sell it to an airline or a travel agency. And if a company decides to use these unauthorized verification APIs to silently harvest or ping numbers without that strict legal basis, the risks are severe.
They really are.
But how does the AEPD actually enforce this? If an invisible HLR ping leaves absolutely no trace on my screen and my phone never rings, how does the Spanish government catch a company doing it?
It all comes down to the digital paper trail. The ping might be invisible to you, the user, but it is highly visible to the telecom operators.
Oh, right, the server logs.
Exactly. When a company uses an API to send thousands of HLR lookups, there are server logs, billing records, and API request receipts. If a consumer complains to the AEPD about telemarketing harassment, the agency can audit the company.
And they ask for proof.
They will demand to see the consent ledger. If the company's server logs show they pinged your number, but they cannot produce a timestamped record of your explicit consent, they are caught red-handed.
And the penalties aren't just a slap on the wrist either. We are talking massive, potentially business-ending fines from the AEPD.
Absolutely.
And on the consumer side, having your number floating around unprotected in these scraped databases directly leads to identity theft, phishing scams, and endless harassment.
Which is exactly why robust defensive tools exist for citizens. In Spain, consumers can legally protect themselves by registering their number on the Lista Robinson.
A Robinson list.
Yes. It is an official, legally binding do not call registry. If you put your number on that list, companies are legally required to cross-reference it against their own databases before they launch any marketing campaigns.
And if they don't?
If a company pings, processes, or calls a number on the Lifter Robinson without having explicit prior consent that overrides the list, they are in clear, undeniable violation of the law.
So what does this all mean? Because we started this deep dive talking about the relatable urge to just check if an old friend's WhatsApp is still active without having to call them.
Right.
How do we draw the line between me being a little curious about a college buddy and a corporation violating constitutional privacy laws?
Well, it ultimately comes down to scale, intent, and automated processing. The legal framework is primarily designed to regulate commercial activity and mass data handling.
Okay.
Sharing a phone number among private individuals or, typing a URL into a browser to see if a friend is online isn't a crime. It falls under the personal or domestic activity exemption of data protection regulations.
Great. Because I'm not building a massive database to sell them car insurance.
Exactly. But the moment an organization, a business, or an automated system begins verifying, pinging, or transferring phone numbers in bulk without a clear legal basis like explicit consent or a highly specific legitimate interest, it transforms from a casual check into a severe privacy violation.
So the tools are there, but the rules are strict.
Yeah, the technological tools to do this exist for everyone, but the heavy legal burden rests entirely on the organizations utilizing them.
It is wild how deep this rabbit hole goes.
Yeah.
I mean, we really started with something so mundane, sneaking around WhatsApp and Telegram, trying to decode the psychology of vague timestamps and disappearing green dots.
It escalated quickly.
It really did. Then we scaled up to the massive enterprise level, looking at how global companies use E.164 formats as digital sorting machines to send silent HLR pings across international borders.
Yeah.
We explored how something as simple as a concrete parking garage draining your battery can completely skew a corporate database. And finally, we ended up in the high-stakes realm of constitutional law, digital paper trails, and the fundamental human right to privacy.
It perfectly highlights how a seemingly simple everyday question like, is this phone number active, inextricably touches on global engineering, the physics of radio waves, behavioral app design, and fundamental human rights.
It really does. And before we wrap up today, I want to leave you with a thought to chew on. Throughout this entire deep dive, we have been talking about our devices constantly having these silent, invisible handshakes with cell towers and corporate databases. Our phones are constantly whispering to the network, exerting energy just to prove to the system that we exist, all without us ever seeing a single notification on our screens.
The inescapable background noise of the modern digital age.
Right. So if our phones are always doing this, silently communicating on channels we can't even see, at what point does our digital presence become something entirely out of our control? Like, do we ever truly have our phones off if the global network is always out there, holding our place, just waiting for us to return?
That is a fascinating, slightly unsettling question to sit with.
Definitely something to think about the next time you hesitate before dialing a number. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We always love taking these complex, everyday topics and really unpacking the mechanics with you. Until next time, maybe think twice before you assume that old contact number in your phone is completely dead. It might just be waiting for a ping.